So, hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on steering strategy execution with OKRs. I'm really happy to be here with Laura, product strategist for Cloud ERP and OKR program lead. My name is Alex, I'm head of customer success at WordPress and also responsible for the SAP account. And to start this session, we suppose you all experience challenges connected to strategy execution, and this is why we want to start this session with a brief survey question about challenges or the major challenges you experience in strategy execution. My colleague will ensure that you now can answer the question. Yeah, what are your biggest challenges in strategy execution? Is it missing alignment and collaboration around strategy? Is it limited execution speed because maybe focus or prioritization is missing? Is it lack of ability to determine really what is the impact of your work, of the projects, the initiatives, the activities you execute? Is it the transparency that is missing? Also regarding contribution of different teams across the organization, contribution to strategic targets. Is it about an inefficient resource allocation? Or do you rather miss customer focus in strategic priorities or the actual execution? Just we'll wait a few seconds until you can answer. I guess sometimes it's rather about several of these challenges. All right, we will get back to the results later on, and I will now just continue. And before we have a look on today's agenda, let's start with a quote from Robert Kaplan, a professor at Harvard Business School. And this quote also highlights the reason for today's webinar about strategy execution, because 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategy successfully. When I think about strategy, I directly think about these high-level slide decks created by highly paid consultants. And the interesting thing is when I look into these slides, they are almost the same, at least from a content perspective. Yeah, every organization states we want to become more customer focused. We want to become more sustainable. We want to drive our digitization, maybe become the most attractive employer. Revenue growth is always a topic. So the content of strategy is almost the same. But if strategy is not a competitive edge anymore, what is it then? Is it maybe strategy execution? And this is what we want to learn today. We have planned to first dive into the topic of how important it is to work agile in strategy execution. We will then also slightly pass the topic of OKRs as one methodology to make that work. And then Laura will also share her experiences and some insights about their OKR transformation at SAP ERP. And then at the end, we have definitely some time left to answer your questions. Please note, if you want to ask a question during the session, you can just raise your hand or just post it in the chat or use the Q&A function. And my colleague will then ensure that you get unmuted or answer or ask the question to Laura and myself. Let's first have a look on what happened over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, we had several major events that had an impact on global economy. Probably the biggest one was COVID-19. Not only had an impact on global economy, but also on our personal lives. But this is another topic. We had the problem in the Suez Canal that was blocked by that big container ship Ever Given, stopped ships from bringing products to Europe. We had now sadly 2 wars, one in Ukraine, one in Middle East, and there was that major event of OpenAI that launched ChatGPT and made AI accessible for everyone. So a lot of major events in just a pretty short time frame that had an impact on global economy. And then we have this guy, not sure who of you knows him. He is Henry Ford, invented the assembly line work at Ford, yeah. Use cars in a super fast and super efficient way. And this is also connected to the slide before, because our time or we were living in a very volatile world with a lot of events that had an impact on global economy and an impact on the way how we as employees create values in organizations. But a lot of organizations still stick to the paradigm of efficiency invented by this guy, Henry Ford. And if you now compare the work you do in your daily work and the work the employees of Henry Ford did back in 1950, this is completely different, right? When I ask you who can go to work and exactly do the same things again and again every day, like just completing a recipe, then I guess you would probably say like, no, that's not possible. It's not work. Yeah, maybe you say like, okay, we do a lot of meetings, but I mean, not the same things every day. So it changed tremendously how value is created in organizations. But the world in that we live has also changed completely. And that makes it impossible to work in the same way how we did it in the past, just following a recipe, following a standardized process. Because our world nowadays is much more complex. There are so many factors influencing our decisions. There is a lot of volatility. Yeah, we have 5 major events in not even 5 years, yeah, that had an impact on almost all organizations worldwide. There's ambiguity, so we don't actually know what the event means for us, for our work, yeah. Just imagine COVID, yeah. When you heard about that event, yeah, there was maybe some of you heard, yeah, oh, there's a virus or a disease in Ischgl spread around the world, but when you heard it in the news, you could not imagine what that means for your work then or for your life later on. And for sure, uncertainty. We also don't know what that means for our present. So there's unclarity as well. And these things lead to the fact that we have to change something. Let's now have a look on how strategies are usually executed right now. Usually, we have a certain phase where we start defining a strategy. Yeah, these are the guys from McKinsey I mentioned before. Strategy definition. Then there's a next phase, strategy execution, where we start implementing projects. Yeah, some agile, some rather waterfall driven, but there is really a long phase executing things. And then we have one day a kind of review, where we use our KPIs on top level, for example, where we try to assess, okay, did we had an impact on lagging metrics like revenue and costs and so on and so forth. But what happens if there is an event during execution that changes the status quo? What if the customers start requesting different features, or mentioning different needs, yeah? For example, I don't want to buy a software solution without artificial intelligence anymore. Then we also have to maybe rethink our strategy. And that makes it actually obvious that we can't execute strategies in a linear process anymore, but rather have to execute strategies in faster feedback loops, because otherwise we cannot deal with changes in our environment. And this is where OKRs come in. OKR is a framework about agile strategy execution with short feedback loops. Usually it starts with an announcement of the top level priorities of the top level strategy. This is where we want to position ourselves. This is where we want to move to. This strategy is then operationalized through teams by the definition of priorities for a shorter time frame, for example, quarters or years. Then there's a next phase where the collaboration is clarified, with alignment, or we call that alignment in the OKR process. Then you have check-ins that are used for reviewing if you make progress on your priorities. And to do so, we use leading metrics, because we want to see if we can maybe predict the developments of the future already, and in order to react much faster on changes in our environment, to if there is a risk or blocker popping up, we can see with the leading data points that okay, this task or this initiative or this project is not driving our priority, not driving our data point anymore. We're not delivering value, and so we change the way how we try to drive this data point. And then at the end of the cycle, we also have an overarching reflection if the work was effective, if we also had an impact on higher level metrics, on lagging metrics, and for sure we want to continuously improve the way how we work. And what changes then is actually that we move from efficiency, what was the past world, to effectiveness. So the left side is our Henry Ford. This is where we said, like, this is our process, and we optimize the process to perfection. I would say German companies are super good in that one, but actually this is not requested anymore. It's about effectiveness, identifying what are the things we need to do in order to become successful, and not perfectionizing what we did in the past already. And this makes it also obvious why these big tech companies in the US are that successful, because they are testing a lot of things. They are experimenting continuously. And if you look at the figures, 90% of their A/B testings fail. And only 10% are successful. But these 10% are that successful that they outperform all other organizations worldwide, and that they earn these great margins and this great revenue. And it makes it obvious that we have to become faster, experiment much more, and not focusing on efficiency that much. Maybe important note, that does not mean that we not want to work efficient, but at least efficiency should be second priority and effectiveness should be first priority. Let's now have a look on how OKRs can help there in detail, and also how OKRs are embedded in our entire strategy execution process. What you can see here is two pillars of strategy execution of the past. I mentioned that at the beginning already. There is that one pillar of KPIs, or strategy. Actually, for me, KPIs is not strategy, but to be honest, if you ask people, this is what people consider as strategy. At least in the past, considered that as strategy, at least kind of. So a pretty long-term target. For example, we limit the global warming and want to stay below 1.5 degrees. Big target, probably the most important one nowadays. And then we have the implementation level through measures, through projects, through initiatives to achieve that target. We install solar panels on the roof of a factory, could be one, could also launch more electric vehicles. There are a lot of things we can do, eat less meat, whatever, to address that topic. But the problem is, when we look at all the measures and projects and how many we have achieved, we don't know actually if we will achieve our target of limiting global warming below 1.5 degrees. Why? Because when we're now measuring where we are with global warming, and we take an average above for 5 years, we are probably not there yet. And then we can say, yeah, maybe it's sufficient what we do. But we cannot really say like, do we meet this target or do we not meet this target nowadays? Yeah, it's always the rearview mirror, because in 10 years when we realize, oh, we have not achieved it, it's too late. We cannot steer, we cannot affect or change that anymore. And this is why we need a third layer between strategy and execution called OKRs. This is our layer that closes the gap between strategy and execution. And this layer contains a measurable added customer value. In this example, described in reduced CO2 emissions. When we really measure if we could reduce the CO2 emission to a certain level, yeah, then we realize, okay, we will also meet the target of limit global warming probably. So this is the possibility, or this allows us to really steer strategy execution and learn early on if we are on the right way. This is now a very global or high level example, but the same works for organizations. Yeah, if you look at revenue as a KPI, maybe conversion rate as one rather leading indicator, and then on optimizing a sales funnel or a sales process as your initiative, yeah, or measure. So this principle works for several circumstances. And then when we now connect that to how strategies are executed and bring that together, it's obvious that we have to connect these three layers in a good way in order to allow steering strategy execution. Because we can answer several questions. Yeah, we can answer, for example, if our strategic priorities, and you can see now I replaced OKRs with strategic priorities, because for me, it's not about OKRs only, it's about outcome-oriented strategy execution where we use leading indicators. Yeah, OKRs is just one goal-setting methodology. So if strategic priorities really have an impact on our KPIs, this is the first thing we can test with that approach. We can also test if or see if our measures, projects move the needle on the priorities, on the leading indicators. And we can also assess if our resources are efficiently allocated to our most important priorities. And through that connection, you can then really also reallocate resources, identify the things that have not been effective, and then really steer your strategy execution. Here, again, this small example, yeah, KPI is revenue, strategic priority, maybe the net promoter score for your brand reputation that increases by 20 basis points. Maybe on a lower level, one team is working on a new branding campaign that increased the conversion rate by 12%. And then the measures projects that are actually the actual implementation work, the actual work that is executed is development of a new brand commercial, where then 12 people work on and 4 million in euros are spent. So you can really see that model I showed you before is also working when you have an exact or one-on-one sample or example. And then I mentioned that before, you can really see this allows us to test hypotheses. And this is what OKRs is about, testing hypotheses. And to close the loop, what I said at the beginning, testing hypothesis is important because this allows us to work in these feedback loops and to react on the events and the changes in our environment. How we test these hypotheses in the OKR process, we have on the one hand side, on a short-term basis, our check-ins, where we measure if our measures or projects or initiatives move the needle on our key result metrics. And we have these reviews at the end of a cycle after 3, after 6, after 12 months, where we test if our OKRs, if our strategic priorities have had an impact on our KPIs. When I now apply all these advices and really change the way how I execute my strategies, the question is, what can I expect from that? And I just will share a few things that you can expect. It's much broader, and also Laura will share a few things later on, why they started implementing OKRs, yeah, what have been the challenges they had in mind they want to address, and how and what they experience already. But you can at the end take several decisions. What kind of organizations you want to be, yeah? Do you want to be an organization that encourage focused work, or is it more about everything is important? Just want to give you a small example about that. Imagine you move to a new flat and you are only allowed to take 3 boxes with you to your new flat, only the most important things. And you decide, no, I want to take 5 things to my new flat, 5 boxes. But at the end, only 3 out of 5 will arrive and you don't know which one. What would you do? Would you reduce it to the 3 boxes and ensure all of them will arrive? Or would you rather go for 5 and then don't know which things are arrived? And I guess it's clear it's much better to know what things you can achieve, and therefore focus is super important. And if everything is important, you don't have focus. The same is for transparency, yeah? Do you want to know on what priorities other teams working on? Or do you rather say like, yeah, transparency, information is a competitive edge and I don't want to share that much because that brings me in a better position. But that leads to the fact that people work on several topics at the same time. As in this example, yeah? If you try to solve the same problems with different solutions, that might be fine. But if you try to solve the same problems with different solutions and no one knows about it, it's a big issue. And last but not least, another example, who takes decision? Are decisions rather taken based on data, or are decisions taken by the highest paid person in the room? There are many more benefits of OKRs. Yeah, there are communication, transparency, alignment, customer focus, risk mitigation, a more metric and data-driven way of working, engagement and team empowerment, continuous learning. So really many more things, and we will share the slides later on and also the recording, so you can have a look on that again. But you can see there are a lot of things that we can change in the behavior of people. And at this point, I may ask Laura, maybe what have been the reasons for SAP ERP to start the OKR transformation, and what benefits you had in mind when starting your transformation?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that was a great introduction, and I think really sets the scene. I'm sure a lot of things that resonate for people in the call. I'm actually going to touch on a couple of these points in the slides. I can go into those in a little bit more detail when I speak specifically about our experiences within the S/4HANA organization. But maybe to just come to your question, you know, why did we start our OKR journey in the first place at SAP? How did this begin for us? And honestly, it's been an interesting couple of days where I've been thinking about this, because for those of you in the call who are maybe new to OKRs within an SAP context, this isn't a new topic for us. We've actually been doing OKRs, certainly within the S/4HANA organization, Cloud ERP, for around 5 years now. We started back in January 2019. I had to go back through my inbox really to come up with some of these dates. But yeah, it's been a long journey, and it really got me thinking, you know, why was it that we started back then? And, you know, it kind of felt like doing a bit of a history lesson, but a couple of things came to mind. And what I realized was that back in 2019, you know, as a company, we were going through a number of quite kind of seismic changes as an organization. You know, I know we've been talking about our ambition to become you know, a real player in the cloud market for a long time, but this took on some real resonance in 2019. I remember Hasso back at Sapphire 2019, he was much more adamant about the future of cloud, even though I think it was very clear for us back then as an organization that a lot was going to be needed to be done if we wanted to be a serious contender in the cloud market space. But, you know, there was a lot of interesting stuff happening internally back then. You know, in October 2019, we entered this new era of co-leadership with Christian Klein and Jen Morgan back then. We also welcomed Thomas Saueressig to the executive board for product engineering. So there were some quite momentous, I would say, internal shifts, within the context of us wanting to be, really committed to, winning in the cloud. And when I think about how this fits with OKRs, I think I could imagine that this was really a big momentum for why we wanted to test out this methodology, because like you've already said, Alex, we know that a lot of these major tech companies, the Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Adobe, many of these companies had owed a lot of their success, or so they claimed, to being OKR driven organizations. They were data driven, they were agile, they were focusing on outcomes, they were focused, collaborative, they were customer centric, and we know that these are some of the inevitable things that OKRs really force us to be, but ultimately we get better results of it. So I think, just to answer your question, why we started with OKRs, I could believe that this was a big time for us back in 2019 as a company. And it's interesting, you shared the slide. What kind of came subsequently in the past few years has been an extremely disruptive time, and we certainly feel that in our OKR journey. I'm happy to go into that in a bit more detail, but it was a big point of transformation for us, and I think we saw, certainly within the S4 space back then. I know OKRs have gone on to touch many corners of the company, but I think that was it for us. We needed a methodology that would help us be more focused, more agile, more customer centric, in order to have a chance at winning in the cloud space. So those would be my thoughts on that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And I mean, the cloud transformation are still ongoing. I mean, I said it at the beginning, digital transformation, transforming from on-premise solutions to cloud is still one of the biggest priorities, or the priority very often mentioned by our customers as well. So definitely worth to consider that. Before I hand over completely to you, Laura, and then you share more about the OKR transformation at SAP ERP, I just want to close the loop to what I said at the beginning. 90% of organizations fail in strategy execution. Let's also take the perspective of what happens when I work on my strategy execution. When I change something, when I not stick to the past way of executing strategies. And there's a survey from PwC that states companies that invest more time and effort into strategy execution are 3 times more likely to report above average growth, and also twice likely to report above average profits. And that shows at the end, strategy execution might really be the competitive edge for organization nowadays, being fast in that environment and really changing the way of strategy execution. And that does not completely mean that OKRs are the only solution, but it definitely shows that there is something that we need to do in order to become more focused, more agile, faster, also really using data for testing and experimenting much more often. All right, then, Laura, it's up to you to now tell something more about the SAP Cloud ERP OKR transformation.
Sure, I'd love to, Alex. And again, a quick hello from me. I think I know many of you, or some of you in the call certainly, but just to set the context, my name's Laura Marwood. I'm part of the Cloud ERP organization, the S4HANA solution area. And I'm a product strategist as part of that organization. So, part of my job is to help define our cloud ERP strategy, ensure it's differentiating, that essentially we know how we're going to win in this space. But equally, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, the internal strategy to execution part is a key part of that. And as Alex has made us realize some of the challenges that are associated with this. Hence, I ended up taking on the role of our internal, our OKR program lead for Cloud ERP, and also for our Cloud ERP leadership team headed up by Jan Gilg. So yeah, I'm just going to honestly just talk you through a couple of our experiences, certainly from our Cloud ERP perspective. I'm sure that many of you in the call, I've been having a look at some of our participants. We have many members here who are not part of Cloud ERP, which is really encouraging to see, because this might be a topic that's interesting to you. Maybe you're interested in scaling up OKRs in your organization. I'm just here today, honestly, to share a couple of our learnings, because as I've already said, we've been doing OKRs in the S4 space for close to 5 years now. So we've accumulated a fair bit of experience here. It's been a bumpy ride. You know, I'm not looking to paint a perfect picture here. OKRs are tough. I'm sure many of you have probably picked up on that by now. A lot of challenges that come with it, but also a lot of rewards, I think, if we put the necessary effort into it. So maybe if we move along to the next slide, Alex. Yeah, I ended up going for another cartoon because, you know, why not show a cartoon? I just chose this one because I thought this would just quite nicely set the scene, you know, when it comes to, you know, I think some of the challenges we're facing internally. And, you know, I've been doing OKRs now for a number of years. I've been part of the S4HANA organization for close to 7 years now, and I've been somehow involved in OKRs for 5 of those years, either as an OKR coach back in the earlier years, or a content contributor to an objective or a key result, and now most recently in the program lead. And you know, Alex has touched on some of these things, but I think one of the things I've really picked up on this OKR process, and also in my work as part of the strategy team, is, you know, that having a winning strategy is actually only half the battle. You know, our strategy is only as good as our ability to articulate it and also to execute upon it. You know, as a CEO, you may have the best strategy in the world, you know, backed up by the best research and, you know, a great opportunity to capture the market. But ultimately, if you don't have the backing and the confidence of the people in your organization who are ultimately expected to deliver on this strategy, then you're not going to be going very far. And you know, I think this is one of the interesting things if we look at some of the, you know, these very successful high growth companies, you know, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Spotify, PayPal, Airbnb, you know, that there are so many of them, but what they all have in common is not just a compelling vision or even, you know, a fantastic or disruptive product. You know, they all have an intrinsic motivation to win. They, you know, they're willing to take risks, that they can adapt, they can pivot, they want to collaborate. You know, they put their customer at the front and center in everything they do. They think about their brand reputation. You know, they have excellent leadership. You know, they hold themselves accountable, and you know, I think all of these things are also part of bringing a strategy to life. It's not, you know, as Alex has also said, it's not just the mere existence of kind of high-level slide decks or, you know, a big strategy document. We need to find ways to lift those words off the page and you know, ultimately enable everybody to find their part in that strategy to execution process. And this is what I love about OKRs. They can help us achieve that level of clarity on that much more fine granular level, you know, be it in teams or as individuals. You know, it helps us see our day-to-day efforts as part of a wider mission. And certainly in our case, you know, at SAP, it's to be the #1 enterprise application and business AI company. But, you know, saying those words alone won't get us there. We each have a part to play in making that happen. And, you know, this is one of the reasons I personally love OKRs and really see a lot of benefits for us as an organization in cloud ERP. But we know it's challenging. And, you know, having been doing this for many years, I still continue to hear many sentiments you know, that suggests that this is, you know, a challenging process. Maybe if we move to the next slide, I think this is always quite interesting to show. You know, these are just some of the things I've been hearing for many years from internal teams. You know, I struggle to relate to our SAP strategy. Our company goals are fuzzy and intangible. I feel that only top level hierarchies feel the SAP mission. Our company's focus is both everywhere and nowhere. And, you know, I think these are fair things to acknowledge, you know, and maybe these things do resonate with you. And if that is the case, I think that's okay. I'm sure you're not alone in that. It's quite a common reality, I think, for large organizations, certainly like SAP. But if this is the case for you, you know, it might be a moment to think that maybe OKRs could be a helpful vehicle for you and your team to maybe turn some of this around. If we just move on, I just wanted to share a couple of just select milestones with you all for the OKR journey that we've gone on. I'll keep this fairly brief. I already mentioned we've been doing OKRs within the wider SAP context for about 5 years now. And this all started early back in 2019. Yeah, sort of between sort of January and April. This is when these conversations, I've alluded to some of the, the major leadership shifts that we had at that time. We entered this product engineering transformation program. And, like I say, we were committed to becoming a cloud company, and we realized that OKRs could be a vehicle to help us really make this happen. We started working with WorkPath in that same year. We launched an OKR pilot in S4 with a handful of, well, compared to today, 600 users. We identified a number of teams that were trialing out this OKR process. And what's basically continued in the years subsequently has actually been really quite a powerful journey. And I would like to certainly nod to all those people who were involved in this pilot project back then. It was a huge task and a huge undertaking, and by no means am I claiming credit for it. It was really a huge undertaking, and like most change management type initiatives, very difficult to get buy-in, difficult to convince people that this is something worth investing in. So really quite a momentous thing if we reflect where we've come from today and where we stand. We onboarded a number of really excellent OKR coaches. Today we have quite a thriving OKR coaching community, and a wider community of people who are involved in OKRs. And then through the years we've gone on to expand our users. We 2020 we had about 1,000 users using WorkPath as the tool to do OKRs. For us, OKRs, or certainly within the Cloud ERP space, WorkPath is our tool of choice to do OKRs, although I think it's fair to say it's not the only way that you can do OKRs, but certainly for me, absolutely the vehicle of choice. So it's just, we reached 1,500 users in 2023. Maybe just an interesting point to note, in March 2023, and again, this is largely within the Cloud ERP context. We announced our code split back then, which was absolutely a strategic decision, and in my view, absolutely the right one. But what we did see as a result of that when it came to OKRs was a drop in engagement. Now, this inevitably came with quite a lot of internal disruption, some restructuring, some reorganizations. And what we saw, in the data was that, a number of teams kind of dropped doing OKRs. That these can often be side effects, let's say, of major internal disruptions that we acknowledge are just part of it. But it was at that time actually that we launched this reset organization to try and bring, and Alex was a big part of that, and the team at WorkPath to really help us bring teams back to OKRs as a way of refocusing, refinding yourself, strategically within maybe a bit of a chaotic situation. And it's been quite successful. And, we are where we are today. We have sort of 1,650 users currently using WorkPath, and a number of, obviously hundreds of teams using the tool. And I hope, having very successful experiences with OKRs. And of course, I'd like to give a shout out here to other organizations that I know and work closely with beyond the Cloud ERP who are also using OKR. Just a couple of examples here: the BTP team, AI, Signavio, Enterprise Cloud Services. I see a couple of familiar faces in the call here today. So we've really grown, and increasingly more people are coming onto this journey and really seeing the benefits of OKR. So just wanted to share that with you for a bit of context, because it's been a long journey, and I think it's really made me realize that stuff like this doesn't happen overnight. I think anyone who's been involved in a major sort of transformative kind of initiative realizes that there's a lot of highs and lows, and we're upfront about it. There's certainly been times when engagement has dropped and we've really needed it to reset and rethink, why are we doing this, how can this help us? So yeah, the journey is long, but I maintain to this day it's worth it, and this method helps us. On the next slide, I have a couple of just statistics, just data points I wanted to share with you. These are specific to Cloud ERP. And these are all based on a number of sort of surveys that we've conducted internally as they relate to kind of strategy to execution, how people are understanding our strategy, and ultimately kind of how OKRs have kind of interacted with this. Just a couple of data points here from admittedly a 2023 transformation pulse check that was conducted by our internal TRAFO transformation organization in Cloud ERP. 91% of Cloud ERP participants said they understood our mission to become #1 Cloud ERP. However, only 64% viewed the mission as achievable and realistic. So, you know, it's an honest data point. I think this is for us a moment to consider, okay, you know, how can our OKRs potentially help us bridge that gap a little bit between understanding and actually, you know, maybe believing that this is a concrete reality. Perhaps more encouraging, 71% of Cloud ERP respondents see a clear link between their work and organizational objectives. This is an encouraging number because I think we know from experience this has often been an area where we struggled a little bit in the past, you know, getting people to see, you know, where we're going versus what my contribution is. So yeah, I'd like to see this statistic a little bit higher, potentially going forward, but ultimately encouraging. Currently in Cloud ERP, we have 41 teams. By team, I mean sort of, let's say, an average sort of Scrum team, a team of 10 with active OKRs, and we have 150 active OKRs currently in Cloud ERP. A nice data point, this has increased 30% within the past 12 months. So I would like to think that, you know, this was, a good result as a result of our sort of reset and trying to bring people back to the OKR process. We have 51% of OKRs with metric key results. This is a 13% increase in the past 12 months. Again, I'd like to see us, you know, getting this number a little bit higher. We do know that, you know, good key results are metric. They're grounded in data, and we know that this still is quite a challenge for, you know, for people to think in this way. So I like to see that we're making good progress here, but I think you'll agree there's a little bit of room for improvement here. And also with regard to this alignment thing, Alex already alluded to this, you know, 40% of our OKRs are aligned. Again, it's up 7% against the previous cycle, but what I think would be a great place for us to be in is seeing how our OKRs are, you know, much more interconnected. We're seeing much greater internal collaboration, you know, less of this kind of siloed way of working. You know, I do product, I do customer, I do engineering. You know, it would be great if we can find more ways for people to see that, join the dots between those, enhanced collaboration, because ultimately we're all pushing in the same direction. We all have different parts to play within that, but ultimately, you know, we should all be interested in sort of serving our customer, building the best products we can. So, you know, a greater alignment among those topics would be really encouraging. But we're getting there. It's, as I say, the journey is long. If we just jump to the next slide, Alex, this is actually just built on the slide that Alex showed previously as a number of sort of the key benefits. And I just want to call out a couple of key learnings from Cloud ERP, quite generic, admittedly, but I would say these are 5 areas where I've seen real progress for us as an organization as a result of being an OKR driven organization. Quite simply, purpose. And this is kind of reminding ourselves, what's our goal? Why does this matter? What's the why? For whom are we doing this? In many ways, it sounds so obvious, but, you know, I'm often kind of surprised internally how we don't always have these questions front and center of everything we're doing. And I think OKRs, and I see this very much with our leadership team. You know, we're starting much more with these questions before we jump into projects, before we jump into new initiatives. You know, what's our purpose? Who are we serving? Why does this matter? OKRs have really encouraged us to think much more in these terms. Communication, again, it's an obvious one. I'll be honest with you guys, OKRs require a lot of discussion. It requires carving out time into your agendas and finding times to have open discussions about what's our goal and why does it matter. But, you know, discussing why should this be a priority and not this? And I know this can be challenging in the modern work context. You know, we've got full calendars, but it's important, you know, it's important to carve time in to your agendas and in your calendars to have these types of critical conversations, to have healthy debate, to engage in conflict, healthy conflict, to ultimately move forward. So yeah, finding space for discussions, sharing successes, you know, something I think we're seeing a little bit more of, but, you know, what have our achievements been? And also, where are we not doing so great? This is all part of, you know, finding room for more discussion. Metrics, of course, sometimes challenging. You know, this is all about us holding ourselves accountable. If we want to get to a certain place, how are we going to do it and how are we measuring it? Again, sounds so obvious, but it's often very challenging for teams to commit to numbers, commit to percentages. But ultimately, you know, if we want to be a true cloud company, we've got to be data driven. It's as simple as that. So, you know, OKRs really force us to do that. You know, sometimes it feels, you know, that it's a challenge for people, but it's important. Collaboration, I've already alluded to it a little bit. We know that silos aren't going to get us anywhere. I've written it here. It hinders our ability to adapt and innovate. If we can move in a direction where we're seeing, the I as a product manager have a connection with what what people are doing with the customer side and what's going on in engineering and what's going on, when it comes to our our transformation initiatives. They're all interconnected, guys. You've just got to go and find those connections because they exist. We've got to move away from the silos and find more opportunities to collaborate. And empowerment, I think we've all realized that strategy, we're going to execute on our strategy through the results of everybody, not just by leadership teams alone. It's the old fallacy, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And what I love about OKRs is they put every individual, or every team front and center of this, and enable them to make transparent what their contribution is as part of that, and honestly give them an opportunity to shine, through what they achieve. And this is what I really, really love about this process. So these are just very generically, some of our key learnings, I would say, from Cloud ERP over the years, and happy to go into a bit more detail in the Q&A on any of these if you're interested. And maybe just as a final point, just to give you an example of what our objectives for 2024 currently look like in Cloud ERP. Some of you may not have seen these before. I should also say these are all publicly available in WorkPath. As I've said, WorkPath is our tool of choice in Cloud ERP, so they're all mapped there. But as you can see here, in Cloud ERP, we very consciously mapped our objectives in line with the corporate initiatives. It's always about kind of looking where we're going as an organization and how our part plays into that. So this was the approach we've taken in Cloud ERP. We have 5 objective buckets that relate to product, customer operations, financials, and people. And you can see our objective owners or sponsors who are driving progress forward mapped out here. This is just to give you an example of what OKRs can look like in an organization. Ultimately, it comes down to each team on an individual basis, how they might want to structure that. But this is how we've structured it. And the idea is that all teams in our organization who are contributing to OKRs are in some way trying to map their contributions, against these objectives, which also have corresponding key results. So just wanted to show that to you guys, just to give you a real live example of what OKRs might look like in an organization. So I think that brings me to the end of my part, and hope that was interesting. Hope that gave you some impulses. And I would also like to say at this point, if any of you are in the call here today who would be interested in scaling up OKRs in your organizations, I am always happy to guide based on my experiences in Cloud ERP. I very much see this as a collaborative effort, so you'd only need to reach out to me. So thanks, Alex. Back to you. Let's maybe take some questions.
Thanks, Laura. All right. Do we have any questions related to both general ones or the Cloud ERP transformation? If not, time to ask everything you want.
I see Stefan in the chat has asked a couple of things. Stefan, you're very welcome to unmute yourself and ask us if you'd like to. We very much appreciate that. He can't unmute himself. Nico, could you maybe help Stefan unmute himself? Otherwise, we can just read aloud.
I will also try.
I'd appreciate it if Stefan asked the question, because it's quite a long one, but it's a valuable one, I think.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Stefan.
But no camera is not possible. Okay. Yeah, I'm from HR and Global Leadership Development. And we get the clear message that we should train our managers in the direction of SMART. So the opposite, so to speak, of OKR, to make it very simple. And yeah, I'm curious to see or to hear what are your plans. Have you heard this as well? How do you want to combine it? Because at the end of 2024, beginning 2025, you know that we maybe should categorize people again, like we had this years before. And yeah, people maybe want to know very clearly why they are categorized as low performers, etc., or high performers. And yeah, OKR is more a qualitative approach, of course, and very helpful approach, very nice approach. Nevertheless, at the moment, I see not a contradiction, but some challenges coming up with OKRs.
Alex, maybe let me start with this because it's a bit of an internal feel to this one. I mean, Stefan, maybe just a question back to you. You said you see a big difference with SMART and OKRs. What is the big difference that you see necessarily? Because I don't know if I do personally.
I saw OKRs very more qualitative, so not very precise for everyone, that you have to have a corridor to reach a goal, but that you have enough clear benchmarks, so to speak, when you have achieved the goal or not achieved the goal. So they are very more open, let's put it like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll be honest with you, Stefan, I do see a lot of actually more commonality between OKRs and SMART than perhaps. But maybe I can just answer it like this, and then I'll hand over to Alex. So the big difference, I know we're kind of moving this direction of sort of new approaches to performance management internally and SMART goals. Just to make it very, very clear, when we talk about OKRs, we don't want to confuse sort of OKRs should not factor into necessarily like it shouldn't be related to individual performance. So, you wouldn't be doing this for your SAP talks. When we talk about OKRs, these are very much team goals, whereas a SMART goal, which, would be part of your individual performance, would be done on a separate basis. So we're very much
but we get
differentiate those processes.
A clear message to really cascade the KPIs of SAP. I put a course into the chat that peer managers really understand the KPIs of SAP, really cascade by every level the KPIs down. So it's really clearly a clear framework of classical KPIs. That's at least what we understood.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe let's briefly go back to what I shared at the beginning from the presentation. Yeah. OKR is not a framework that you put on top on something, but that rather needs to be integrated quite well. When I look at performance goals, and in general performance management, there are usually two parts of these performance agreements. Yeah, there are a lot of quite often metrics or KPIs involved, and maybe team development. And if we now look at KPIs, then I said, like, if you align your OKRs with your KPIs, you ensure that by working on OKRs, you ensure you drive your KPIs that are important for your own performance and for driving your own performance targets. And actually, an OKR is rather a team target. A SMART goal in your example is rather a personal target. But if they are closely aligned as the elements are the same, you use as input factor, then you ensure that your whole organization and your team is ensuring that you drive your personal targets. So I don't see a contradictory here, but rather like it's required to integrate them properly.
At least it's not a message from the board. So Gina goes in another direction. That's at least what we understand. And she's talking to Christian as well. So we have heard in our programs, we always hear that people do OKRs as well. And we said, hey, fine for you. And also we reach really the goals. And at the end, people are happy if they get categorized based on more or less clear KPIs, then everything's fine. But at least I see that something is coming. And maybe it's not so easy to bring this together because, as I said, message from above is not OKR.
Stefan, the message from above is not OKR. We okay. OKRs are optional. No, I just like to be clear on this, because I see it's totally possible for these two approaches to exist in parallel, and it's optional. There's no organization is sort of dictating that teams should use OKRs. It is totally an optional approach. Hope that helps.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. There's another question of Maximilian in the chat. Maybe we can unmute him as well briefly. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah,
it's about Jira though. It's an inevitable question. Yeah, Max. We may have a short answer for you on this, but yeah, go on.
I'll happily ask this one. So I remember back in 2019 when we introduced OKR, this rigidity that we have set up for ourselves for the roadmap, like how we deliver, how we make decisions to like set out quarters. We have things in place on the roadmap. And then in OKR, we're going quarter by quarter, trying to make decisions. But then we always look at the roadmap and say, yeah, but it's already on the roadmap. We cannot make any decisions now anymore. Is there? Did you solve this problem? Because I know this stick to us way longer than we thought.
It's a great question, Max. And I mean, I guess I can only answer this by saying, look, in an ideal world, we would be well aligned, and like Alex said, if we start with our OKRs, if we start by identifying what the most important things are that we need to do in an ideal world, these would end up being reflected on the roadmap. We know that this is not always the reality, and something we continually have to work at, but I think I can best answer it that way. In an ideal world, those things would be aligned, and I wouldn't necessarily say we've solved it. We know we sometimes have these challenges of, conflicting interests. Things come in at the last minute and kind of upset the backlog and all of these sorts of things. One thing I would say there is, OKR is it's an agile approach. There's in an ideal world, we would be maybe shifting then our priorities. If something comes in, we maybe need to kind of move a key result out into the next quarter or whatever the cadence is, and replacing it with something else. There is slack and there is flexibility in that process. But I like the sentiment of your question, Max. In an ideal world, yes, we would have good alignment there. But we can go on, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, and Max, I mean, at the end, yeah, there are different artifacts. For me, a roadmap is also an artifact, that describes a certain planning or includes a certain planning of your organization. And as I said, things need to be integrated, and I guess you also at SAP will have not defined a roadmap for the next 3 years and not iterating on that. I guess there are also processes or events established where you at least review if are the things on our roadmap still the things we have to do to achieve our target, to bring our long-term strategy to life. So what needs to be done then is to look at how you do that currently and how that can be integrated with the OKR process. Maybe it's just about ensuring that the top level priorities are defined upfront, and then this is one input factor to reviewing and iterating on your roadmap. And then the roadmap can still be the basis for what you want to achieve, But 100%, we have to think about these kind of integrations and how to bring these things together. And it doesn't work if you not look at this. But I would also state, if you have a situation like that, you can talk to the leaders, you can talk to people, and also say, like, it's obvious for everyone that a roadmap that is defined today is probably not valid for the next 3 years, right?
Yeah. It's a great question, Max. And honestly, in my experience, this can sometimes highlight the fact that there are inconsistencies in what we defined here as a priority, what we've defined here as a priority. We know that this is a challenge, right? So it's not easily fixed. I would say this is absolutely one of the ongoing challenges that we experience as part of OKRs and implementing this. Who dictates what is a priority at any given time? It's part of the challenge. But what I do think is good about it, it actually encourages us to have the conversation and actually sometimes bring some of these problems to the table. I know that's not a super elegant answer, and it remains a challenge. But yeah,
thanks.
It's yeah.
It aligns with what I think as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we are now already 1 minute over time, so I propose the following. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Laura or myself, and we are happy to answer all your questions. Also go into brief one-on-ones, discuss things with you you're interested in. Feel also free to connect on LinkedIn and reach out there if you not have an email address. So really, this was just the starting point of the conversation. We really like to dive deeper into all these questions, into all these topics. And as a small goodie, if you also really want to do a training, in-depth training on agile strategy execution, we can also offer you a 25% discount code for a 2 days training on agile strategy execution with OKRs. We will share the slides, as I said before, at the end of the meeting. There's also the link included to register for the training. And then I just can say, like, thanks a lot, Laura, for hosting this session with me. And thanks a lot for everyone for the participation, for the questions, for the contributions. Wish you a great rest of the week.
Thanks for coming, guys. We appreciate it. Chat to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.